Okay, let's get started. Welcome again, everyone. Hello, welcome to the Improving Integration and Coordination of TSMO and Safety Programs webinar. My name is Luana Brashears, and I'll help facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration. As a quick reminder, at NOCO, we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. You can go to NOCO's website, it's transportationops.org. And you can browse through links for TSMO resources and news. Previous webinar recordings and case studies can be accessed from there. So if you look after this webinar as well, you can see the recording for this webinar available at the NOCO website. Now, just a few logistics for today's webinar. We are recording this webinar, and as I mentioned before, it'll be available at the NOCO website. And also, all of you are encouraged to stay engaged by using the Q&A feature for questions and the chat feature for comments. So if you go and look at the bottom of your screen, you see there is a Q&A area, and that one, please add your questions at any time during the presentations. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of all presentations. So as your questions come to mind, make sure you post those in the Q&A area. And then if you have any comments or you want to start a discussion on specific topic, please make sure to add those to the chat so you can get the conversation going. So at any time, feel free to use those. Also, say hi to enter your name. Please feel free to say hi, enter your name, your agency in the chat if you want to say hello to all your peers. And then next, I will just show a standard US DOT Federal Highway Administration disclaimer. This disclaimer just reinforces that product names may be used during the webinar, but the US government does not endorse any product. Additionally, views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters only and do not necessarily reflect those of the Federal Highway Administration. Now I'll hand it over to Jocelyn Bauer. She's an Operations Program Management at Leidos, and she's today's webinar moderator.
Thanks, Luana. And thank you all for joining this webinar on improving the integration and coordination of TSMO and safety programs. We're excited to have you here. As Luana mentioned, my name's Jocelyn Bauer, and I'm a program manager with Leidos, and I serve as the co-principal investigator for the project related to this webinar. I'll be our moderator for today's webinar. And so during this webinar, we're going to hear from several speakers, as you can see on the slide, at this federal, state, and regional levels on connecting operations and safety at the programmatic planning and project development levels. The webinar will be kicked off by Jim Hunt and Anesha Mukherjee, who will give an overview of today's webinar theme, connecting operations and safety, and discuss a couple of projects FHWA is leading to advance the area. We'll next hear from Michelle May, the program manager for the Highway Safety Program at Ohio DOT. She'll provide us with the safety program's perspective on partnership between TSMO and safety at ODOT. As our next speaker, we'll hear from Jim Windsor, the Deputy State Engineer, and George Williams, the Assistant State Engineer at Arizona DOT. They're going to be talking about connecting operations and safety within the TSMO division at ADOT. Last but not least, we'll hear from Eric Hill, the Director of Transportation System Management Operations, or TSMO, at MetroPlan Orlando, the metropolitan planning organization for the Orlando, Florida metro area. At the end, there should be time for answering questions from the audience. So please type in your questions in the Q&A box and we'll save them for the end of the webinar. Turning to our first speakers, I'd like to first introduce Jim Hunt from FHWA. He is a transportation specialist in the Federal Highway Administration's Office of Operations, where he develops guidance and leads research in integrating transportation systems management operations and emerging mobility solutions into planning, design, and organizational business processes. He has worked for FHWA for over 23 years in various planning and operations roles, including 2 FHWA state division offices and FHWA headquarters offices of planning and operations. Anesha Mukherjee is a transportation specialist in the Federal Highway Administration's Office of Safety, where she leads the Speed Management Program. She joined FHWA in 2020 after a 15-year career at the Maryland DOT, where she led traffic operations and safety teams. Jim, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, everyone. Very blessed to have such a great team, contractor team, and support from our Office of Safety with initiative about the progress in this project. So we can go to the next slide, Lorna. I am just going to provide sort of a set the stage, move quickly through some of this background. As you saw, there are 5 excellent speakers that will be coming up, so I want to make sure we leave ample time for them. We're going to talk a little bit about the motivation for the project and describe the findings. So we kind of were looking at, in the area of transportation systems management and operations overall, I think we're at the sort of the next evolution where we're thinking more beyond, traditional traffic operations and traffic management role, and how TSMO could be integrated throughout all the functions of a transportation agency: planning, design, maintenance, and environment. And certainly safety is a critical one. We thought we could help move the needle a little bit if we focus specifically on the role and integration and coordination of safety and operations. And lastly, so I'll just kind of give some highlights of what we found there and how it's been framed. And then lastly, I'll kind of talk about a new project just kicked off, dealing more with real-time operations and proactive safety intervention. This is what we're calling it. So give you a little preview on that. So next slide, please. So I think we all can understand that operations and safety are natural, have natural synergy. They're oftentimes, sibling programs, and we know that a safe, well-operated system go hand in hand with, with a well-operated system goes hand in hand with a safe system, and vice versa. When traffic is moving uniformly and flow is smooth and speeds are consistent, when we are responding to incidents, when we are providing timely warnings about incidents and disruptions on the network, well, that improves both operations and safety. They're both typically rooted in the traffic engineering in terms of a profession. And many of the programs, if we think about the operations program, say in our office, deal with road weather management, traffic incident management, work zone management. They all sort of come at it from both a safety and operations lens. So it's natural that there is strong overlap. But having said that, we do think there's opportunities to strengthen the relationship and amplify the good things by thinking more holistically about the two. So that was kind of the genesis of the project. And what we found is when we're talking to agencies, this was less of a concern at the local level and maybe DOT district level. I shouldn't say less of a concern, but it was less of a question. That was sort of more hand in hand with how they operate daily. But as you move up the geographic level, certainly at the state level, things start to get siloed. Funding gets siloed, planning gets siloed. Analysis methods are very unique or specific. So while we think all areas can benefit from this, we've certainly found some at those higher levels, and certainly within FHWA, we did see the need as well. And recognizing that at times there are some strategies that may appear to be working at cross purposes, and how do we manage that and deal with that conversation if we're moving mobility and we're improving travel speeds. Sometimes that can be seen as counterproductive to safety. So we just got to be more intelligent about how we think about that and frame that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the project, so the idea again was to explore and identify practices and sort of frame where these connection points could be strengthened and what they are and how they could be strengthened. We interviewed our field office folks that deal with the respective programs and operations and safety. We spoke to, I think, close to a dozen agencies, several state DOTs, metropolitan planning organizations. We reviewed a number of safety plans, say strategic highway safety plans and TSMO program plans, and also looked at research that's new and emerging, looking at the coordination and the analysis tools related to the two areas and how they're being holistically addressed. The results of the project will be 3 case studies, 2 brochures, which I'll touch on a little bit later in this webinar presentation. Next slide. So in terms of the areas, we kind of broke down where we found that there are opportunities to strengthen the relationship and the connection between operations and safety in these 6 areas: organizational structure, performance management, data, transportation planning, project development and design, and strategies. And these were, again, largely the reflection of what we heard from our interviews with our practitioners. Next slide. And we have examples and some of the products that we'll be producing through the case studies. We'll go into more depth of how these have been carried out in various agencies, but just real quick, we'll run through some details behind each of these. So for organizational structure, certainly we found if operations or TSMO and safety were resided in the same unit, that certainly facilitated the coordination and collaboration, although that wasn't necessarily a must-have, that there were good examples of good collaboration across those lines. If they both reported to the same unit head, that also could facilitate that integration and coordination. But really it came down to common priorities, common goals and objectives, and just a willingness and leadership support for the integration and collaboration activities. One example we saw was where historically road safety audits may now be included the operations folks in that review. So they're kind of more roadside safety and operations audits, which is one example. And then having staff from respective roles on each other's committees and task forces. And I think we'll hear a little bit about how organizational structure has supported the Arizona Department of Transportation here in a little while. Next slide. Organizational structure is connector 1, connector 2. Performance management, we definitely think that agencies can drive the connection between operations and safety through performance management. Definitely, again, going back to the fact that safety enhancements can improve operations and operational performance can improve safety. And if we can get some of these performance measures reflected in the respective planning processes and plans and move towards strategies to address those performance measures, then again, we're kind of more holistically improving the performance overall of the system. Next slide. Connector area 3 on the data side, integration of safety and operations data. This was a frequent observation from our interviewees that, just simply something so simple as overlaying locations of, say, congestion bottleneck locations with, safety hotspots really was insightful. You might have situations where an operational improvement could improve safety in those areas, or at least know where your investments would be most efficiently targeted if you're working on parts of the network that tackled both of those at the same location. Certainly, there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy around new data sources, probe data, crowdsourced data, what we can get from vehicle data, and the opportunities to really expand on that and add those to the portfolio of data to improve operations and safety. It's another, I'll talk a little bit later about a couple of challenges, but that's certainly where we have to overcome some disconnects that exist now between, safety data sets that are largely historical, maybe rely on police reporting systems, and how do we bring in some of this more real-time and dynamic data and new data as well to make more informed decisions. But certainly the whole CAV areas, you hear some examples of where real-time warnings and intersection management can certainly be advanced with both areas of safety and operations. Next slide. Okay, I think this is fourth area. Transportation planning. So much starts in planning, where we kind of think about goals and objectives, and it's a great opportunity to more holistically approach problems in the region and in the state, and look. And there are certainly opportunities through the congestion management process and through the way in which agencies like MPOs might set up their project prioritization processes to include factors that address both safety and mobility. Definitely see some opportunities there to advance both areas. We did see some examples too of where TSMO or operations folks were an integral part of state strategic highway safety plans, and vice versa, where safety specialists were heavily involved in the development of TSMO plans. So lots of opportunity here. I think Michelle is going to touch on a real neat tool from ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, called their TOAST tool, which again brings data in from both a safety and operations perspective to target investments. Next slide. Jocelyn, if we'll take it along just cut me off here. Project development and design was one area where there was a lot of evidence that this was working well in many places. That once you get down to the project level, there is a real intentional thinking of both safety performance and operational performance. And they identified, several specific types of projects where, this was happening. Intersection control and evaluation design, interchange design, work zone traffic control plans. Clearly, these are all of interest, and we're trying to achieve objectives in both areas. Florida DOT gave us a real strong indication that they take this very seriously as well. Once a project moves from scoping into final plans, that all the other divisions get a chance to review that and see if there's opportunities to improve the project. And definitely safety and operations are important reviewers in that process. Next slide. Might be the last connector. So just some of the examples we've heard, we heard others talk about in the sense of where there were specific strategies that they thought were beneficial to both safety and mobility, and you see them here. A lot of these, we've thought about in operations realm for a long time, and even made some strong safety pushes for that as well. But you do see some additional items here maybe to think about, like access management, pedestrian, bicycle sorts of applications, and certainly the focus on complete streets and vulnerable road users, may really expand this further. And we're also looking at that for several other efforts underway nationally. But I think the other thing that highlighted for us, at least in the operations side, and looking at, say, categories of projects for funding, I don't know the degree to which the safety toolbox really disaggregates activities among these areas as much as you see here. You might see general, for example, ITS categories in the HSIP program, but we're trying to expand the toolbox of strategies that might be considered for safety countermeasures. Okay, I think that's all on the. So those are the 6 connectors. I think you'll see themes woven into the various presenters that come next. And so there are challenges in connecting operations and safety. There's a lack of understanding of the benefits. There's different perceptions of the term safety. I sort of really focused on crash rates and overall crash numbers, but the importance of the severity of crashes was really brought to light through some of these conversations. So you have to think about being more, nuanced about talking about safety. And like I said, there's going to be challenges with integrating data, also tremendous opportunities, but challenges with that. How do we bring some of the funding programs, make them more broadly available for both? So these are, some of the things we'll be highlighting and trying to work on going forward. Next slide. So with the project, we are, like I said, developing 3 case studies, and the agencies, some of the agencies on this webinar are also being featured in those. Talk about focusing on data in Florida, project prioritization, funding and design in Ohio. And these all, I think, include a state DOT and an MPO example. And then in Arizona, more so on specific projects that were operations projects that benefited, had the safety benefits. We're also updating our National Highway Institute course on improving highway safety with ITS. And next slide, please. I'll just mention quickly, and I was remiss, I need to give Anisha a few minutes too. So the new project is to look at, as I said, how can we use real-time operation strategies and data for more proactive safety intervention, and to kind of bring some of these newer tools to the mainstream using real-time short-term safety measures based on current conditions or predicted conditions. So that's the gist of that project. It's just kicked off, and I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of excitement about using vehicle data and intersection analytic data and surrogate safety measures like near misses and those kinds of measures to really strengthen this connection. So I'll stop there. I think Jocelyn, I need to move on, but I want to give Anisha, my colleague from the Office of Safety, a couple of minutes to kind of frame some of this from their perspective. And she's been a great partner for the Office of Operations. So sorry, Anisha, can you jump in now?
Sure, Jim. If I can find my video buttons. There I am. Hello, everyone. This is I'm Monisha Mukherjee from the Office of Safety out here in sunny Washington, D.C. And thank you, Jim. You can sense Jim's excitement. He nearly forgot about me. But as Jim said, I'm here to talk about the traffic safety, why what we are doing here is important. And let me start by saying that when it comes to traffic safety, our numbers don't look too good. As per NHTSA projections, an estimated 42,915 people died in motor vehicle traffic crashes in 2021. And that's a 10.5% increase from 2020. This early estimate is the highest number of fatalities since 2005. And it's also the largest annual percentage increase in the history of FARS, which is the Fatality Analysis Reporting System. This also includes a very worrying 13% rise in pedestrian fatalities from 2020. So in response to this crisis, earlier this year, USDOT unveiled the National Roadway Safety Strategy. And at the core of this strategy is a department-wide adoption of the safe system approach. And now the NRSS is also getting resources from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which includes the new Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary grant program that will invest up to $6 billion over 5 years to fund local efforts to reduce roadway crashes and fatalities. And this is just one of the several safety-forward funding opportunities made possible by bill. But if we have to make a dent in the numbers and reverse the upward trajectory, we need to look beyond just safety projects, which is why we are here today with our friends in operations. We need to look at how we operate our roadways and gain a deeper insight into why we operate our roadways the way we do. We need to leverage our synergies, take advantage of our partnerships, both internal and external. And as you will hear, you heard from Jim, you'll hear from some of our other colleagues. This project is a perfect example of that. So we at Safety are very, very excited to partner with our colleagues in operations and our peers at the state and local agencies to find ways to integrate and coordinate TSMO and safety programs to further strengthen these connections and make safety for all road users a fundamental decision criteria in every project. And with that, I think I hand it over to Jocelyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Anisha. All right, so next I'm going to introduce Michelle May, who has been a member of the Ohio Department of Transportation for more than 33 years, serving in communication and program management roles. For the past 15 years, she has managed ODOT's $183 million highway safety program, which provides technical expertise and funding to state and local governments to prevent severe crashes on Ohio roads. She also manages a statewide coalition of organizations focused on reducing traffic deaths and serious injuries, including those involving distracted driving, speeding, pedestrians, and young drivers. Michelle, you can begin when you are ready.
Great. First of all, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. So today I'm going to give you a kind of a broad perspective about how we've combined and really collaborated with between our operations and our safety divisions at the Ohio Department of Transportation. It turns out there's a lot of collaboration that really began years ago. So for about 15 years, we've had a history of overlaying our congested locations with our crash locations to routinely find ways that we can work together on both mobility and safety in our state. So this collaborative process has a long history, and it was relatively easy for us to start up a brand new program. Next slide, please. So a little background on our TSMO effort here in the state of Ohio. So we initiated an official TSMO separate program back in 2019. It was one of the first new capital programs that we developed in over 20 years. And in order to build that program, we really used a lot of the structure and the funding from our safety program. So for example, we have a $183 million highway safety program in the state of Ohio. And to stand up our TSMO program, we actually used $5 million over a 4-year period to get our TSMO program up and running. And we're actually in the process of kind of developing a TSMO 2.0 in which we're looking for a long-term funding stream for the program because it has been so successful. In terms of, back one, please. There we go. So I also wanted to mention that we thought it was important to have a standalone TSMO specific program so that we were making sure that we developed TSMO specific projects and we were able to embed some of the operational goals of TSMO into other programs and not just safety. So we used our highway safety program as a mentor and collaborator for this TSMO process, starting up our program. Next slide, please. So it turns out that we share a lot between TSMO and safety in the state of Ohio, and that includes people, process, and prioritization structure. So let me explain a little bit of that. So in terms of people, we share a district-driven structure. We both have program engineers or coordinators in each of our 12 districts. And in a few instances, they're the same. Or the TSMO coordinator often has come from the safety program. So we have a lot of cross-disciplinary interaction. In terms of the process, we have a similar process that relies on multidisciplinary committees at the district level that help us study locations and develop recommendations for funding, be it safety or TSMO. And again, these district and statewide committees that we use for both TSMO and safety are often overlapping. And then the third component of that is between safety and TSMO, we share a love of prioritization lists and maps. They really do help guide our staff and potential project sponsors on where to look for projects. So the TSMO priority list, we call it our TOAST tool. It looks at things like travel time performance bottlenecks, safety performance measures like crashes within a corridor, incident clearance, secondary crashes, and we also look at freight corridors. Next, please. In terms of process, TOAST really modeled their process of the safety process that we use here in Ohio. So both TSMO and safety are both using a variety of sources of data. We use that data to develop priority lists. In the case of TSMO, it's our TOAST list. And then both programs use a very similar study process. So in the TOAST area, or I'm sorry, in the TSMO area, they rely on abbreviated studies that they do at the district level to come up with recommendations on how we can improve operations. And that is the same process that we use for safety. We do both abbreviated and formal safety studies. Out of these studies, both programs are looking for quick hit improvements or long-term capital projects. Next slide. In terms of funding, we really try and look for ways to combine our funding between TSMO and safety and other project programs. So we tell every TSMO coordinator that when you're looking at the priority list and you're about to study a location and develop recommendations, you should also look at that location to see if it overlaps a safety priority list. If it does, then you're going to go through that study process. When you develop recommendations, you're actually going to go through the HSIP program to see if you can get funding from there first before you go through the TSMO process. If you're a TSMO coordinator and you're looking at a priority location and it doesn't overlap a safety priority list, then you're going to study that location, develop recommendations at the district level, and then you'll apply for TSMO specific funding through the statewide committee. Next slide, please. Another thing that we borrowed from the TSMO program, borrowed from the safety program, was our cost benefit analysis tools. So TSMO very early on decided that we would use a consultant to research some of the common countermeasures that might come out of a TSMO process and study recommendation. And we used that consultant to develop a list of typical countermeasures, costs, what type of benefits we could expect in terms of safety or crash reductions, delay reductions, developed a benefit cost range. And then we also tell you whether or not the cost benefit analysis is based on a low, medium, or high level of research or certainty. Now, these tools aren't as robust as what we would use in the safety world, where we have crash modification factors and we've got decades of experience in developing benefit cost analysis. But it's a good start, a good way to think about how you might evaluate projects as you're trying to decide what to fund at a statewide level. And it's actually something that maybe in the future we all can be building upon. Next slide, please. So the sweet spot for safety in TSMO really is when our priorities overlap. When it's a TSMO priority, a safety priority, that's when we can collaborate on some projects. So I'm going to share with you two examples. So probably the most high profile project that safety and TSMO have collaborated on are, one is the I-670 Smart Lane project. So we have a corridor between downtown Columbus and the east side. It also services the airport, where prior to 2019, we routinely had lots of congestion and lots of crashes. And as part of that, the traditional solution would have been to spend millions of dollars in widening the roadway to alleviate that congestion. Instead, we worked with our TSMO section to apply a TSMO type solution where we built up the shoulders, we added some signage, we made minor modifications to the roadway, the interchanges, and we were able to open up a lane of traffic using the shoulder during peak travel time. That opened in 2019, and we went from a typical or a high point of a 20-minute delay during rush hour to a 5 to 6 minute delay during rush hour. So we certainly thought that was a good, successful project. And in addition to that, we probably shaved about $20 million off the cost of what we would have paid for a traditional solution to that problem. Next slide. The other thing the project did is provide more speed and travel predictability. So this chart shows you in orange and blue what travel speeds were like in the PM peak on that corridor before the project. And then the green shows you a very level amount, or a great level of predictability in terms of travel speeds during the peak hour after the project was opened in green. In addition to that, we plan to run some before and after crash analysis. Unfortunately, the project opened in 2019 during COVID, right before COVID. So we're waiting for traffic volumes to even out. Next slide, please. The second project that I would highlight is where TSMO and safety work together to fund variable speed limits on the I-90 corridor up in Cleveland. It's up in the northern part of the state. We had a lot of lake effect snow, and during bad winter weather, there's poor visibility, and it's been the scene of multiple crashes over the years. So we worked together with TSMO to fund a project where along the 12-mile corridor, we did variable speed limits, we did dynamic message signs, and as a result of that collaboration, since the project opened, we've seen about a 40% reduction in speeds on that roadway. Next slide. So let me, in closing, share with you three other areas where we have collaborated with our TSMO partners in the state of Ohio, and that is speed setting. So we have an emphasis area in our strategic highway safety plan for speed. Our TSMO staff leads that emphasis area as a part of their action plan. 2 years ago, they led a statewide effort to review and develop the first major policy revisions in how we do our speed setting process in almost 10 years. Not only did they revise the process to make it easier for our staff and local governments to revisit and set new speeds, but we also now allow our partners in the districts and at the local level to use a 50th percentile to calculate speeds in urban areas where we have bicycles and pedestrians. This not only helps us with our strategic highway safety plan for addressing speed, but it also helps us with bicycles and pedestrians. Ohio recently triggered the 15% VRU rule. So we're hoping that the speed setting process that we developed with TSMO will lead to reductions in or improve safety for bicycles and pedestrians in the future. Next slide. The other way in which we've worked with our TSMO or operations partners is in preventing wrong way and work zone crashes. So we use real-time video from the TMC to trace where and why wrong way and work zone crashes occur. And what this allows us to do is we can look at crashes in near real time and evaluate whether or not we could set up that work zone differently or should and we can make those changes in the field. In addition to that, we can use that information to collaborate with our TSMO safety and design partners within the department to not only take immediate action, but to develop new standards or capital projects if they're needed to address these types of crashes. Next slide. And then my final slide, I wanted to also share with you that even before the TSMO program began, we had a long history of working with the operations side on different programs and projects. So for about 10 years, we've had a statewide signal timing and phasing program where we use safety funds to have on-call consultants that can inspect equipment, conduct counts, develop timing models, and measure results. And our district staff and local government partners can access that program just by comparing priority lists. So if you have an intersection or a corridor that's listed on either the ODOT, TOAST, MPO, or local priority list for safety and congestion, you can tap into that on-call program to modify signal timing and phasing. And in some cases, safety will pay for modifications to the equipment. So with that, that is a broad overview of how TSMO and safety are working hand in hand in our state. I'd be happy as a follow-up to this meeting, if you'd like any details about any of those programs, just contact me at that email address. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Excellent presentation. All right, next we're going to hear from folks from Arizona DOT. Jim Windsor is the Deputy State Engineer for the Arizona DOT. Jim has worked in the public sector for the past 20 years, providing management and leadership in the areas of construction, maintenance, and for the last 7 years, ADOT's TSMO division. George Williams is the Assistant State Engineer for the Arizona DOT and is the Group Manager for the Operational Traffic and Safety teams. George has over 20 years of transportation engineering experience focusing on safety, operational analysis, planning, design, and the implementation of pedestrian, bike, and traffic improvements. Jim, please take it away. You may be on mute.
I definitely am on mute. I'm going to get started off by going through our division structure and really show you how all of our units within our division are linked to safety and operations. And hopefully it carries that theme straight through. But another thing we wanted to share with everybody on the call today is what we feel, it's a really good example of what we feel is important. And it's a very easy way to make changes to the system. I wouldn't say easy, but it's a very efficient way to make changes to the system quickly and start decreasing crashes quickly without having to wait for a project to go through the development cycle. And I'll roll through that. Next slide, please. So this is the structure of ADOT's, or Arizona DOT's, Transportation Systems Management and Operations System. The red box on the bottom is operational traffic and safety. I'm going to start there at the 6 o'clock position. You'll see that the regional traffic engineering and all of the safety functions roll up underneath this group. And this is important. The regional traffic engineering is centralized, but we have fully staffed engineering staff in the northern portion of the state and also the southern portion of the state. And this is the same group that's going to do our road safety assessments. It's the same, the traffic folks also look at all the safety data, the crash data. And the regional folks also provide support to our rural signals and lighting operations outside the Phoenix metro area, which is important. The next unit off to the left, systems maintenance, which is our signal operations, ITS maintenance, pump station maintenance, pretty much everything maintenance is what these guys are going to do, but they're maintaining our system. And more importantly, they support in the signal operations and the signal phasing of the system, working directly with the regional traffic engineering staff and also with our safety staff. So there's a link to maximize the operations of maximize the safety and the operations of our system. And then there's the systems technology group, which really is like the think tank, right? They're responsible for analyzing all the emerging technologies, for piloting emerging technology projects or demonstrations for those projects, and evaluating those projects for feasibility for future deployment. Some examples which I think we've shared before, but I'm going to mention them again here because they were very successful, was the wrong way driver detection system that we rolled out in 2018. That system detects the wrong way. It notifies the wrong way driver that they're going in the wrong direction in order to try to get them to self-correct. And it also notifies our traffic operations center and law enforcement for more timely mitigation to that incursion. But secondary goals to that is it provides a 20-second video clip that can be used by our engineering staff, our regional engineering staff, to actually look to see how that wrong way driver entered. Did it turn right? Did it turn left? Did it go straight through from a frontage road? But it's that video that allows them to go out, and maybe there are some engineering countermeasures that could be deployed to help reduce those incursions at that particular intersection or that type of intersection, but it does show the trends. Our dust detection system on I-10 between Phoenix and Tucson, that was deployed probably 2 years ago, but we had horrific crashes at milepost 214, and it's just the geographic location of that area, fallow field on one side, the direction of the monsoon winds, and it would go out to pure brownout conditions. But the detection system actually senses the visibility, and it automatically reduces speed with variable speed limit signs going out through the corridor, automatically posts safety messages to the DMS within the corridor, and also dynamic message signs that are on the approach to either side of the corridor. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention ADOT's continued rollout of our adaptive ramp metering, one of the first projects that we did, very successful on State Route 51, one of our freeways in the Phoenix metro area. And this team continues to roll that out. And it's a great project, and it continues to be a benefit to both the safety and the operation of the system. The systems technology team is also currently updating the division's ITS master plan. That plan is going to be used for future technologies and which future technologies will be deployed, how those technologies can continue to improve the safety and operations of our system. And more importantly, this group, system technology, also measures the performance of our system. And they use multiple data feeds. They'll use the embedded loops that are built, that are embedded into our pavement structural section across the Phoenix metro area. They'll also fuse that data with third-party INRIX data for the places where we do have gaps, but the third-party data allows us actually to look at operations of our entire state, our entire system across the state. Now, we won't have volume or classification data with the INRIX data, but it does show, it will show the performance of our system and where the performance of our system might be lagging or degraded, or for some reason not functioning properly. And with this team working with our safety team hand in hand, who can then overlay crash data on top of the performance data, well, then it really highlights where we need to focus our road safety assessments and where we need to focus our countermeasures to not only improve mobility, but more importantly, improve safety as well. Our traffic maintenance group, it pretty much is what it says it is. They maintain all the statewide signing and striping across the state. We manufacture our own signs, but the signing and striping is important, right? Whether it be width of the stripe, the retro reflectivity of the stripe, retro reflectivity of the striping. But one of the main things this team does that supports our safety efforts is this team is what allows us to quickly deploy low cost, high impact countermeasures that come out of some of the targeted road safety assessment teams that the operational traffic and safety group do. Then there's our traffic management section. We got a 24/7, 365 traffic operations center that supports statewide traffic incident management. We have a dedicated incident response team that runs in the Phoenix metro area on 2 different shifts that overlap to assure we capture the AM peak and the PM peak. And they're out there using the push, pull, tow, drag to open those lanes, keep those lanes open, and support our Department of Public Safety troopers when there are incidents to better control the traffic, move the traffic to a detour, whatever we can to reduce the queues and reduce back of queue crashes. This group also houses our road weather management team who provides support during our snow and dust events, and also provides that direct connection between other divisions within the agency that actually provide the staff that run those snow plows, and how those teams can better utilize the technology from our road weather information systems to maximize their resources during those types of events. And the traffic management section also houses our ADOT's emergency manager as well. Our systems management team is kind of the bridge between our different divisions. We all have assets and features that we need to maintain. So this kind of a bridge between it. It maintains all of the DOT's feature inventory system. It provides the maintenance management services, whether that's procurement contracts or whatever, for all the maintenance activities, both roadway and ITS/TSMO activities both. And it also develops and rolls out the annual needs-based maintenance budget as well. And lastly, the business administration. Every division needs help with administration, whether it's HR, budget, procurement, but this team also manages the Signal ITS warehouse where we do keep those critical infrastructure in stock and ready to roll in case of knockdowns or something like that. Next slide, please. So the one example that we want to share with you today, and George Williams will talk more about this, and he probably speaks faster than me, but this is just the baseline of what we want to go over. So we take the crash data, the systems performance data, laid on top of each other. It's going to prioritize these locations that we can go out and look at, do a road safety assessment. Maybe it's a targeted one where it's going to be a low cost, high impact deployment, or it could be a full scale road safety assessment that needs to go into the program and look for a different funding source, whether that be HSIP or we get the opportunity to bundle that into a future roadway rehabilitation project. But from those RSAs, we're going to develop countermeasures, and from the targeted, they're going to be deployed the low cost, high impact countermeasures. Let's get that improvement, decrease in crashes, improvement in safety. Let's get that rolling quickly. But they also come up with good performance-based practical design opportunities. And I say within existing projects because we've done that within existing projects, but it's important that you need to be up front, hopefully in the scoping phase, to get that done. A lot of our PVPD opportunities require design exceptions, and design exceptions aren't exactly kind to a project schedule. But we've had great success with those, and I think George can talk about a few of those when he goes through his slides as well. And if not, if it's a full-blown RSA and it needs a future standalone project, well, that's okay too. We get it into our program, our planning to programming process, which is P2P, and we'll get it either it has to compete with all the other projects, or maybe it can compete for the HSIP program funds, which compete for all safety across all public roads. So with that, I think it's time, and I turn it over to George. Jocelyn.
Thanks. Yeah, so as Jim said, there's a lot of different things we do. We'll kind of go through this portion of it. Really kind of putting the operations and safety together has really helped us tremendously on some of our efforts. And just to touch on that a little bit, traffic safety is centralized. The regional teams are located throughout the state. And so we really kind of pass that message out through them to the regions and then to the districts. And we meet every 2 weeks to kind of go over the operational and safety messages. And so there's a lot of collaboration by having the structure the way it is. Next slide. 3 things that I want to kind of note today is road safety assessments, internal and external, bottleneck restripes, and intersection restripes. Those are kind of the 3 focus areas for this presentation. Next slide. Yeah, so we do these a network screening. We go through once a year. We look at the high crash locations, and we develop a field sheet. I like to have one sheet that has everything on it. Most people don't take the reports in the field, or they're flipping through, or it's windy, or whatever the case is. So we have one field sheet has all the information on it. They can do quick glance to look at the time of day, the type of crashes, just a lot of different information for them to have right at their fingertips, and usually a map on the other side. It's super helpful for the road safety assessment teams. Next slide. When we go through, what we had found with the RSAs is that we were doing just a few per year. Really wanted to ramp that up and try to get more of those done and get more improvements out to the public. So you can see in 2019, we ramped up the number of RSAs, and the goal was 50. We pushed that in 2020 over 50. What we realized though is, if you go to look at the other side to the upper right side, the implementation side, we were still way behind on the implementation. What we were hoping is to implement countermeasures at least half of these locations, and these would be low cost, high impact type improvements. And so we kind of scaled back the RSAs to focus on the implementations. And the bottom part of the slide is the before and after. What we looked at is did we reduce crashes? And you can see, some years better than others. 2020, we won't talk about that. Most of those are on one particular corridor that had some other issues. But if you look at the overall, we've had a 33% reduction in crashes at the locations where we've implemented countermeasures. So it's been real successful from that standpoint. And these countermeasures are basically signing and striping. And one of the great things about it is, once we've gone out and done the RSAs, because we have the operations folks and the signing and striping folks in TSMO, and between operations and safety, we've had these discussions, and we can get those work orders over and get those implemented very quickly, and we don't have to go through a development cycle, as Jim had noted. And again, we're getting a 33% reduction, basically using maintenance forces to just do signing and striping improvements. Next slide. And there you go. That's the bottom line, is we're getting things out to the public to try to improve safety, and we've also, with that, improved the operations as well. Next slide. One of the things we've looked at is a lot of bottleneck restripe. So we've had bottleneck locations that create backups, and what we find is, as Ohio does, we've also done that, where we've overlaid it. We haven't done it as long as they have, but I think it's a really good point to make, that I think it's really helpful. And again, having the operations and the safety folks together helps us. So here's a situation where we had a single lane ramp going from the US 60 to the I-10, and it was significantly congested. It was causing significant speed differentials. So there's a lot of operational issues, but it was also our #1 crash location for 1 mile segments in the state. So what we did is, we wanted to, from an operational standpoint, we wanted to go to 2 lanes, and the concern was going to narrower lanes and shoulders, that we would reduce safety or potentially increase crashes. But we were more concerned about the weave, the dive in, people passing and then diving at the last minute, or blocking in the speed differentials. And again, it was the #1 crash location because of all those other issues. And what we found is that actually safety was improved significantly, and we had on the ramp itself about a 33% reduction in crashes, and on the main line that was behind this, basically caused by that restriction, we had a 73% reduction in crashes. So again, we were able to show that despite the design exceptions with narrower lanes and narrower shoulders, we significantly improved safety, and really that was because of the congestion and the differences in speed. We've done that in a few other locations. We also did that on the I-10. We had a 2% reduction in crashes on that one, but we actually, because of the numbers we looked at before and after, we actually had a 50% increase in volume because of a new section opening up. And so that is a much better result based on rate, but we haven't gone through and calculated that at this point. We also have a couple other locations where we had similar restripes with design exceptions, and 74% reduction and 68% reduction. And again, these were mostly done for operational reasons, but when we overlaid the crashes, we had significant benefits both operationally and safety. Next slide. And intersection restripes have been another one. A lot of these come out of the RSA. Some of these come out of operations. We had done a number of these left in, left out type intersection, T intersections in particular, designs for capacity, for things, median restrictions, access control, or to try to prevent signalization in areas that the signals aren't in a good location or be difficult for progression and those types of issues. What we found though is that they did improve operations, and we're using them also for the RSAs, because we also found crash benefits looking at it from our standpoint. Next slide. What we did look at is there's a lot of different issues we had to kind of go into on the alignments and different things. And so we ended up kind of refining those a little bit with some guidance on these. Next slide. The other thing that we ran into is the way we've always done it. So here's just a quick, we've got 8 different ways. Some places we have these T intersections, and some places we just have the 1 lane each direction. Some places we put in a left turn lane with the a median. Some places we put in a center 2-way with a brake, center 2-way without a brake, a median with center 2-way on one side, an acceleration lane. And then we have these kind of 2-stage lefts that we call them the type G and the type H. And what we found is, it was very much, I wouldn't say personal preference on the engineer, but it's the way we've always done it came up a lot versus the performance. And we went through, and the performance based on the speed and the congestion and the crashes seemed to be much better with the G, and the H was purely used as a retrofit, but also had some improvements and has been received well by the public, especially on the side streets. Next slide. So we also sent these out to a number of engineers that work with us, some of our partners. Some of them, I believe 5 of them were traffic engineering directors at some of the large cities in the Phoenix metro area, and 4 of them were expert traffic engineers, expert witnesses that would defend us in court. So we sent it out to them to get their feedback. Very, very positive on the type G, mixed on the H, and again, it was a retrofit. It's not the ideal situation, but we did have some benefits for those. Next slide. We ran into standards versus safety a lot on this particular issue and design. Next slide. But to try to standardize these, we did come up with a new standard. We drew it up. We looked at it. You can basically see that you get the 2-stage left turn refuge, not a full acceleration lane, but just a refuge. We can do these with restripes in a lot of cases. But there was a lot of concern that it would be less safe, even though that's not what we were seeing, and we didn't think that was the case. But again, a lot of it's not the way we've always done it. Doesn't meet our standards, and our point is that's why we're changing the standards. So it doesn't always go smoothly as you'd like. Next slide. What was interesting is we did pull up we did find out that there was a study that was done by a NAU, Northern Arizona University professor, Brendan Russo, that did show that these 2-stage left turns, the left in, left out, left turns, were significantly safer. Again, we were using it for operations, and actually he's submitted he's gotten a crash modification factor approved and is now in the clearinghouse. So again, another way that we were working on the operations and safety, and we were able to get it documented through the study with Dr. Russo. And I believe that's back to Jim to kind of close us out.
Yeah, thanks, George. Excuse me. Just from the agency level, I just want to make it clear, there's 100% buy-in for all TSMO initiatives at the leadership level. And the challenge, and I'll say it's a challenge, but it's really a positive thing because we've made great progress, is just penetrating the why for TSMO to legacy staff. More and more people get it. They understand that a lot of times what we're asking for, they're not budget busters, and they can be implemented into previously programmed projects, even though they're already programmed. A lot of the opportunities or improvements we're asking for would be just a small budget increase, if any at all, especially when we're talking about striping. Now, one of the challenges is if it is a performance-based practical design, and we do it, the request results in non-typical shoulders, well, that's going to take a design exception. But those, we want to get it way up front into the scoping process. So if we'd like to have these ideas, these PBPDs off the shelf, be able to inject them early in the scoping process, and that we can usually work that way, and we can work with our team. So it's getting, or should I say, teams across the division. So there is improvement there, but there is still some of the folks that think a TSMO project, oh, you're deploying technology. No, not always. Sometimes but what we're trying to do is improve the operations and maximize the safety of our existing system, basically on the footprint as it exists today. And they're really starting to understand that not all operational improvements, they're not always expensive, but we also have to understand that if we don't go through from the very front through project or planning level scoping, or very at least into the project scoping design kickoff meetings, we have to take into account, they have schedule requirements too, but it's our job just keep pushing the why for TSMO, and I think it's a positive, not really a negative, because I think we've been making good headway there. Next slide, please. And that's going to wind it up for us. There's no right or wrong answer to this silly question, but I'm just letting everybody read it, and you can reflect on it. And maybe during your reflection, there's things that you can think about with your current processes that maybe you can improve and improve the performance and safety of your system as well. With that, George and I thank you all, and Jocelyn, I'll give it back to you.
All right, thank you, Jim and George. Next up, we have Eric Hill, who is the Director of the Transportation System Management Operations area of Metroplan Orlando, the MPO for the Orlando urbanized area, including 3 counties. Mr. Hill is responsible for planning and implementing strategies that use information and communication technologies to enhance the transportation network within the Metroplan Orlando area. He has been employed in the transportation industry since 1984 in positions at a transit agency, planning authority, and a transportation research center. Please take it away, Eric.
Well, good afternoon, and I know that somewhere in the world it's morning, so good morning. This afternoon, at least here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I'm going to touch on a few things. I'm going to start with the history of TSMO at Metroplan Orlando, and it's going to focus mostly on our partnerships. The previous 2 presenters spoke more extensively about the engineering aspects of TSMO and safety. But I'm going to touch on a couple things that we've been doing, touch a little bit on our congestion management plan, a study we did on connecting and autonomous vehicle readiness and how that applies to safety. But mostly it's going to talk about the partnerships that we have created with the various jurisdictions and organizations to advance TSMO, but also to address safety. Now, can you go back to the beginning slide for me? I just wanted to finish with just a couple of introductory remarks. A lot of the strategies that we're deploying are operation-based strategies that Jim already spoke about. And just building on what George just finished speaking about, that when we talk about TSMO, a lot of our stakeholders think that it is technology only. And I just try to convey in speaking with our stakeholders that TSMO, it can be low tech, it can be high tech. The low tech can be just, an agreement between jurisdictions on how they're going to apply technology. And then the high tech is actually that, developing technology that is going to improve safety and improve reliability of our transportation network. And then again, I guess one of the benefits of going last on a panel is that you get to reflect on some of the previous presenters' comments. But again, George ended with why. Why do we do this? And it's because we want to improve safety, we want to improve reliability of our transportation system. But the how and the what is what we also try to advance through TSMO. Next slide. So the history of our TSMO program at Metroplan Orlando, and we are a metropolitan planning organization, which in essence means that we don't own and operate anything. But we started our TSMO program after our board chair, who was Orange County Commissioner Ted Edwards. He's the gentleman that's in the center of the 2 officers. To his right is Sheriff of Orange County, and to his left is a Florida Highway Patrol Trooper Commander. And what we identified is that if we could address some of the incidents on our limited access roadways, we could reduce congestion. And so we started this campaign entitled Move It, Yes You Can, because like myself and many other drivers or vehicle operators, we learned how to drive. And if we were in a crash, that for liability reasons, we just kept the vehicle or vehicle right where the crash occurred. Well, state law in Florida says that if the vehicles are operable and there are no injuries, you have to move those from the roadway. And so this campaign was to educate operators on what happens if you're in a crash. And yes, you can move it. Well, that led us into developing a TSMO program because through this effort, we were able to show that it was not just capacity improvements that we need to start to build on and blend with our business process, but there were ways for us to manage and operate our transportation network to improve our system. And so we have identified and we dedicate funding in our TIP, in our long range plan for TSMO projects. We've identified champions, and in this case, it was Commissioner Ted Edwards, who would lead the charge for us. And one of the learning opportunities for me in this was I recognize how elected officials, when they champion a cause, and that cause is successful as this one has been, that the others want to mimic that. And so they will also want a cause like this. But we've also been able to make this a regional effort, and it's enhanced our ability to advance emerging technologies and to be innovative. Next slide. So, as I just mentioned, when one elected official finds a cause and they're successful, the others want one too. So that particular year, Ted Edwards was our board chair. The next year, we had a new board chairman who came in, and he's the gentleman that's in the center of the picture, seated. He is from, our planning area includes 3 counties: Osceola County, Orange County, and Seminole County. And this was one of our commissioners from Seminole County. He also was our board chair at the time. And so the next year, he said that he would like to have a program that he could champion. And so since safety has been a concern for our area, he wanted us to do a safety program. So what we developed was a program called Worst First. And the worst causes of the 10 worst causes of crashes, and then the 10 worst locations for crashes in our region. And we got the leaders in our regions to sign a pledge that they were all going to support this. And so what you have pictured here are the sheriffs from the 3 counties, as well as the chief of police from the city of Orlando. You have the Florida Highway Patrol trooper. You have the county executives from the 3 counties that we represent, as well as the Department of Transportation. Next slide. So this is a list, a graphic of the 10 worst crash locations in our region. And one of the learning things that came out of this is that we identified these 10 locations based on data that we had compiled on crashes. And what I'll speak about later is community traffic safety teams that we have in the state of Florida, and each county has one. And so one of the learning experiences was when we went to each of these community traffic safety teams, when we went to their meetings to introduce this project, many of them questioned the use of the data that we had. And it was because these teams are made up of local law enforcement agencies, fire and rescue, the media, and towing industry. And fire and rescue, local law enforcement, they're the eyes. What we learned was they are the eyes and ears on the roadways. They can tell you where crashes occur. They can even tell you why they occur. And so what we had to do is we had to go back and we had to re-identify locations. So what you see here is that second round of locations that we identified. Next slide. So this again is one of the early partnerships that we developed as an NPO. And we like to, at this time, we would we were fond in saying that this was our opportunity to go outside of our sandbox and work with others. And so we identified the 10 worst behaviors for crashes for motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. But we also advanced that whole notion of engineering, education, and enforcement as ways to reduce crashes. So this was a campaign. It was a low tech opportunity for us to get out and to make our stakeholders aware of crash locations, behaviors, and a lot of it was built on or resulted in projects that were those operational based projects that Jim spoke about earlier. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our congestion management process that we completed in June 2020. Next slide. And in the congestion management process, it identifies management and operations, or TSMO, approaches and strategies that can help us reduce crashes. And one of the goals that we have is safety. And so we've identified factors or objectives in our congestion management process that we want to address. And you see the performance measures that we've identified and that we include in our CMP. And in this instance, it's showing the number of crashes and types of crashes that occurred between 2014 and 2018, and then the trend. Now, we want to use this as a baseline in the next slide. Result in a performance chart that we will provide each year, report on, that shows, how we're doing, if we've met our goal and if we have not. And since we have been, like many areas have been, including target zero or zero fatalities as a goal for all of our safety programs, we see the target is zero. But in some instances, we're just not getting there. And again, safety is an important issue for our planning area. The Dangerous by Design report for, I guess, maybe the last 5 years has always had us ranked number 1 or number 2. And we're not proud of that. And it's not a place where we want to be as a region. So safety is important. And just outside of our TSMO program, it is part of our planning process. Our partners, the local jurisdictions, as well as the state DOT, also has safety high on their priority list. Next slide. So connected and autonomous vehicles, they certainly are being, the whole notion behind this use of technology is not only to improve or reduce congestion, but also have that safety component. And so we completed a connected and autonomous readiness study. And the focus of it was to address how ready we are for this technology, how ready our partners are, and then how ready our stakeholders are, the people who use our transportation network, because we want to be the source for this information. And there's a lot of confusion with this technology. There is a story that I like to use when I talk about this, is that and this is true, I was at a party and there was a gentleman there who was quite inebriated. And he led a discussion on beer. And he explained that a malt beer can be called a beer, but a beer cannot be called a malt beer. Now, I don't know. I just took his word for it. He seemed to know what he was talking about. But I use that analogy to say to many groups that I speak to that a autonomous vehicle can be a connected and autonomous vehicle, but a connected vehicle cannot be an autonomous vehicle. And that is because an autonomous vehicle takes away a lot of those operating functions that we as humans typically control when we're driving a connected vehicle. But part of it, this study was to justify advancing the technology, making advancements in our infrastructure to support these types of vehicles. And safety was certainly a component. And for most connected and autonomous, connected vehicles, there's all types of systems and functions and alerts to conditions that could lead to a crash. And certainly with autonomous vehicles, it's supposed to be eliminated. Now, I recognize that every time there is a crash involving a Tesla that is in theory in autonomous mode, that sets us back a couple years, I believe. But part of this study, again, was to show how technology is going to help improve safety in our transportation community. Next slide. So I spoke earlier about our community's traffic safety teams. Again, they're made up of law enforcement, fire and rescue, the media, and towing. And again, it was a way for us to build a partnership and to go outside of our sandbox and not only talk about planning, but again, also to have the conversation with how technology can be used in improving safety. And one of the challenges that I think we met as an agency is we led the implementation of red light running cameras, a form of technology. And as a person who spearheaded this effort, it became controversial with our board because we had part of our board saying that this was just a revenue generating adventure. And then we had behind us, we had local law enforcement saying, no, this is a safety investment. It can reduce not only red light running, but the worst intersection crashes are those T-bone crashes involving red light running. And so we had local chiefs of police, sheriffs supporting us, which was somewhat new that we had law enforcement supporting a planning agency's effort. But also it was a good use of funds. In theory, now instead of having a officer at an intersection attempting to catch someone who's gonna go ahead and violate a red light signal, now we have technology that can be used. And we are now trying to have a discussion with our board on how we can use the same kind of technology for speeding, because that's another issue that we have in our region, and I imagine around the country. So again, another partnership that we have developed over the years with non-planning agencies to advance safety. Next slide. So we've had a lot of luck, I'd say, in working with University of Central Florida. This is one of the major universities in the country. It's the second largest university in the country. But we partnered in writing an application. Metropolitan Orlando submitted an application to USDOT. It was a safety application for a safety grant, and it was to look at a crash prediction system. And this was a system that collected data, real-time data on roadway conditions, and forecast what crashes would occur, what types of crash. And it was only used or tested on limited access roadways. But the whole notion was to predict crashes where they might occur so that you had a better situational awareness of the roadway. And based on that, you could early deploy response vehicles, response units in anticipation of those crashes. Next slide. And so there's a whole lot behind this, a lot of simulation, a lot of data collection, a lot of analysis. And I'm not going to discuss that because it could take us all afternoon. But in the end, I think what we as a planning agent, what we want to know is how can this benefit us as an agency, and how can we use this to advance some safety applications? And so in the end, what we wanted to do and what this provides us is some hotspot identification. It helps us in developing some TSMO strategies that we can evaluate, and then provides guidance on our local TIM operations, or our traffic incident management operations. Next slide. Okay, the Attain Central Florida. This is one of those ATC MTD grants that, again, we partnered with Florida DOT, University of Central Florida, to develop and deploy intelligent transportation systems to improve not only mobility, but safety. And one of the big impetus behind this is that University of Central Florida, they have a lot of students that walk, or they're pedestrians, and that bike. And so one of the safety components is many, but one that we are also partnering with is, next slide, it's called Ped Safe. And this is the use of connected vehicle technology and roadside devices, or wearable devices. And the wearable devices are smartphones. And so we're looking at high crash locations around the university, and we are testing now we've completed the test around the university on conflict points based on smartphone applications that students would have to download, with onboard units in vehicles that are included in this test, and see how well they work in reducing conflicts and recognizing those challenges between pedestrian, bicyclists, and vehicles. And the good thing about this one in particular is that this one's scalable. So we have a university community, a very large university community with pedestrian bicyclists, but it's a certain demographics. And one of the other areas that we have a high safety concern is in underserved communities. And so what we are doing now is we've tested it at the University of Central Florida community, but we're going into other urbanized areas where we have high rates of crashes. But these are areas where these are areas that are historically underserved communities. And we want to test the same technology. Now, we are just starting this. We've identified 2 locations that are in urban areas, high crash locations, and to see how well it operates in this environment. Now, we've learned some lessons in using it at University of Central Florida, but some of those lessons will apply. And because the demographics are much different, we want to see how well it applies. And I think that is my last slide. Yes, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Eric, and thank you to all of our speakers. We now have a few minutes left for some questions here, and I think Luana is going to bring us all back, at least our videos. And for those of you who have been following along, many of the questions have been answered in the Q&A pod already, because I know we're running a little short on time. A lot of great speakers here. So why don't I start out with just a couple of them here. I'll do some picking and choosing here of questions. One of them that I thought was particularly interesting was whether or not there are performance measures that you found that help to foster collaboration and mutual benefits for operations and safety. I know Jim had wrote a response there, and I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on that more, Jim, or if there are some of our state and MPO practitioners who'd like to talk to that.
Well, a couple of things came to mind quickly for me. One is the fact that we are, we still need to kind of expand the toolbox of crash modification factors and safety prediction methods for some of these strategies, so that they are, they can be evaluated and their own performance, forecasted performance benefits, factored in. But also just the fact that there, certainly some measures I can think of more of an agency output or agency activity like based measures, how quickly incidents are being cleared, how quickly speed limit signs are being adjusted based on adverse weather, how quickly information is getting out to travelers through travel information systems. I think those would be some, types of measures that would both camps could really rally around. But I'd open it up for the states and Eric to.
Jim, I just want to tag one.
Yeah, I'd like to just add one that go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, there was a bit of a delay. Let's go with Jim first and then go with Eric.
I wanted to tag along with what Jim said. We do actually measure our TIM timeline, and it is, we do have a performance measure for that. And it does build collaboration between our incident response team and our troopers that respond to those incidents on the road. And we have seen, our goal is 90 minutes for a full closure, and those are usually could be a fatal crash, but we've seen those times drop immensely, especially with new technology coming in that DPS can use as far as drones to clear the scene. So we have seen improvements, and we do measure it. So I just wanted to share that.
Great.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, we do a lot of that as well. But one of the areas that we want to start to do more in is identify those near misses at locations. And some of that we can do with existing technology, some of the traffic cameras that are in place. But if we can identify those near misses, and if we recognize that there's a lot, that potentially can help us preclude a major crash. So that's one of the areas.
Okay. Anyone else want to answer that? No. All right. Well, I know there are some other ones here too. One for Eric here from Caleb Winter. Do you link the community traffic safety teams with TIM, and is there an overlapping attendance?
Yes, there is. We have a TIM team, and that's for our Florida DOT District 5, which covers 7 counties. We have 3 counties within those 7. But yeah, you do have overlap of the same people attending both meetings. So that information is shared.
Okay, great. And then one other for you, Eric. How does I think it's talking about the one you're working on with UCF, the crash prediction model, compare with the model in the highway safety manual?
I am not sure, because I'm not too sure with the highway. I'm not that familiar with the highway safety manual. And again, this was a pilot program. And we wanted to see if FHWA would extend our contract so that we could test on arterial roadways, because this was only applied to limited access roadways. So we wanted to go a little bit further and see if we could apply it in a more meaningful way, because more crashes occur on the arterials than on the highways.
Okay, all right. And I guess as maybe one of the last questions, but challenges and lessons learned. Tracy Scriba mentioned, and this one was directed to Michelle, but I think it applies to all of the speakers here. We've all highlighted several successful collaborations between your operations or TSMO staff and safety. What kind of challenges are you encountering in bringing together safety and operations, and any advice for agencies who are on the line here who are interested in bringing those together better, I guess, or closer?
I can go first. I'm not sure if there's a delay, but I think it's a huge benefit to have them connected. We've seen that just from our few years of being a division. We've seen just huge benefits. The challenge is, I think I stated at the end, is more of getting the why for TSMO to those legacy engineers that still, want to design a roadway and we're going to rehab a roadway, and we're like, wait a minute, we want to talk to you about the striping. Why? It has stripe. We're going to put it back where it was. No, we can make improvements. Those are really the challenges, and that's just collaboration within the division. But I did state at the end that it's getting better, and I think that's a plus, and we still continue to push it.
Excellent. All right. Any other comments on that?
Yeah. I'll go ahead. I turned off the video because it told me it was unstable. So just to cut down on bandwidth. But Jim, Jim keeps saying why, and I don't know if he read Simon Sink's book, Start with Why, but I did. And again, starts with why, and then you have your what and how, or your how and your what. And that's again where we start. Now, the challenge that we have had is, because we're talking about technology, the fear of privacy invasion. That when we start talking about this is typically what pushback that I hear from from the community. So that to me is always going to be a challenge, but that's been one of the major challenges we face.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, I will go ahead and close out our webinar. I just want to thank our speakers for sharing their experiences on connecting operations and safety in their organizations. I think you've given us all a lot to consider, and I know personally I'm going to need to go back and listen to the recording to get it all, but we really appreciate it. And thank you all to the participants as well, and the questions that you gave. Well, this concludes the webinar, and thank you and have a good rest of your day.